Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. And as you can see in the background, the Archbishop is in the background too. They're seeing Carnival, right? Carnival. And today, we have the trilogy. Peter Mitchell used to have a trilogy, but we have a trilogy for all you. And today, Archbishop wants to have a conversation with us on Carnival, evolution, or cycle. Carnival, evolution, or cycle. Good evening, Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon. How are you in the midst of the season?
I'm doing real good, I was thinking there on your opening, David Rudder had a song 1990. And one of the lines in that song is, the more things change, the more they remain the same. 1990, please make a lie of me. Well, that's kind of what we're talking about, that the more things change, the more they remain the same. And that's why we have to be looking at the question of whether we've seen an evolution in the carnival or we've seen a cycle. And an evolution means that you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. A cycle means you have a returning to familiar places, spaces, and experiences. And that's a real big question. But today we're looking at Carnival as the festival, Monday and Tuesday, with all that has to do with it. Last week we looked at the steel band. The week before we looked at all the different elements of the carnival, right, where we focus on the pan, the fete, and the Monday and Tuesday. Then I went deeper into the pan. Now I'm going deeper into the Monday and the Tuesday.
You're going into the Monday and Tuesday now?
Yeah. Well, actually, yes, it's the Monday and the Tuesday, because if I start after midnight on Sunday, that's Monday.
Yeah.
So going into Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, I just want to let you know. I mean, this thing is all over the place. People been saying, hey, when are you going to get into the calypso? We want him to get, the man look like he know the lyrics. I say, just pause. Let the Archbishop have a conversation with us now.
What they don't know is that I is a man who dealt with lyrics for a long time ago, I have plenty of the other songs where I delve deep into the lyrics. I even have a Bob Marley song. That most famous of Bob Marley songs, where I presented on a ethnomusicology conference, and I wrote 20 pages on the first verse of Redemption Song.
20 pages on the first verse.
And then I had to cut it down to be able to present, because it was too much. But that's a whole other story. We could talk that on another time. Today is Carnival.
All right.
Let's go into the Carnival.
Nice. So what's with the Carnival? What's with the Carnival and the evolution or cycle?
Well, the Carnival has a real long, and I would tell you, a very complex history. It's long because it predates the Caribbean. It's complex because you can't look at the Carnival head on and understand it. And you have to see the Carnival from other perspectives if you're really going to understand what's happening with the Carnival. Because the Carnival is really a way of seeing into the soul of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's where I want to start by saying that the problem that you might see is not a problem with Carnival. The problem you're seeing is a problem with the soul of Trinidad and Tobago. And when we look at the Carnival, that's what you're seeing. The health or the illness of the soul of our nation.
Wow, you're diving right inside there. It is the soul, the health of our soul is what you're saying,
The health or illness of the soul of the nation. you know, long time they believe if you look into somebody's eyes, you could see the health of the person.
Yeah, yeah.
You look at their tongue, you could tell the health of the person. Look at the carnival and you can tell the health or the illness of the nation as a whole. And I want to leave that, I want to put that out there. I want to say that's kind of my theory. And if you push me, I'll tell you why it's my theory. But you can't judge the carnival as an event in itself. It is actually more of a litmus test of the state of the soul of this nation.
Boy, I am kind of winding up here in anticipation of where you're going because I have my own ideas in terms of the health of the nation, especially as we're talking about, for me, the spiritual health of our nation, the social health of our nation.
Yeah. And so what we're going to be doing is a very long, over 200-year journey where we will look at how the carnival reflects the health or reflects the illness of the nation, of the soul of the nation, not just of the nation, but of the soul of the nation. And that's a very different view. And that's why I'm stating it up front so that when we look at it, we could see it for what it is. You see behind me, I have the kiddies.
Hey, and they look beautiful.
They are absolutely beautiful. And when you look at Kiddies Carnival, you see something so different than when you look at the Big People Carnival.
Mm-hmm.
It's so different, huh? And to me, that's where the real genius of the carnival is these days. But let's not get beside ourselves with that. I want you to remember my overall principle. The carnival is really a reflection of the health or the illness of the soul of the nation. If we look at the carnival, it really reaches back to the country's early contacts with Europe and Africa. The whole Carnivalesque was brought from Europe and just transplanted into Trinidad and Tobago. And the whole Carnivalesque was brought from Africa and transported into Trinidad and Tobago. Both Europe and Africa had their own versions of the Carnivalesque. And I want to make that distinction between the carnival, which is the event that is happening, and the Carnivalesque, which is the thing that is the driver of the event. So for instance, in Europe you had, and still today, we have remnants of it, where you would have the Feast of the Holy Innocents. Mm-hmm. And in Europe, on the Feast of the Holy Innocents, in many parts of Europe, that would be a whole street festival. And you would have the whole inversion of the world, the turning of the world upside down. The pauper becomes a prince and the prince becomes a pauper. The bad boy becomes a monk. The monk becomes a bad boy. And the whole inversion of the world. And that was a European way of celebrating. And they have all kinds of theories about it. In Africa, you had the Carnivalesque in a very different way. They wore masks. And the mask depicted a different disposition, a different view, a different entrance into the world of ritual or the world of the community. And so and they had the rhythm of the drum. And so the drum, the mask, the dance were all part of a carnivalesque that was part of Africa. Long before Africa or Europe landed on the shores of Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm saying this to say that when we look at carnival, we have to see this stream that comes from two different continents that lands up here on our shores, and that does different things over the last 200 years. And that is the best opener I could give to you.
Nice, nice, nice. I heard somebody give a comment on that, boy, and it was interesting. This melting pot, this coming together, this coalescing of Africa and Europe, and what it brought.
Here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
Right here, right here, right here. You see, when the French planters, they held the mass balls in their homes on the days before Ash Wednesday. And the other thing you have to look at is the pre-Lenten carnival is a feature of Catholicism.
Yes.
It's only in Catholic countries that you have the Monday and Tuesday before Ash Wednesday as carnival. Now, the rest of the Caribbean, seeing the success of carnival in Trinidad, and Trinidad exporting the know-how, the technology, and other things out to the rest of the Caribbean, they have their own carnivals. But that's based on other things. So Barbados is based on the crop over.
Right.
When you go down to Nassau and so on, they have the John Canoe, which is an earlier date than ours. But more recently, our carnival has been exported to each island at a different time, more as a tourist attraction than emerging naturally out of the soil of the people and the consciousness of the people. So that's a very different thing altogether. But in Trinidad and Tobago, the Monday and Tuesday before the Ash Wednesday, that was always a carnival time here from the time that the French arrived in the 1770s. That was well entrenched and well celebrated.
And also, in terms of some of the research that I was doing when we had the Catholic Carnival Band, this whole thing of Monday and Tuesday, Fat Tuesday and Monday, and they spoke about it. They said, well, okay, communities knew that they were starting the fast from Ash Wednesday. And in those days, they didn't have refrigerators and so on. So you would have a stock of food, right? So therefore you would
get rid of it.
Communities together, and they will eat out the food.
Get rid of it, especially the meat.
Right.
Especially the meat.
Because you're fasting from the meat. Carnivale, that's the whole name there, Carnivale. Yes. End of the flesh. And so they would come together, and then they started in families and then communities, and then they would eat and dance and have a nice, and then come Ash Wednesday. Said everything stops. We get into
austerity now.
Correct.
You're plunged into austerity, and that's the nature of the pre-Lenten carnival that Brazil has. We have a few other countries in the world have. It's a Catholic festival. And that's something people don't like to hear. But it's a Catholic festival. But okay. On the one hand, on the other hand, we have the African traditions coming forward.
Yeah.
Through the slaves who were brought here and who were living here, and all of their traditions also spilling onto the stage of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, because it was a dry season, a 3-month extended time of festivity was very possible, since work on the plantation was very minimal in this time, because in the dry season, there was little that you did in terms of your field, your reaping, or your boiling house. And while the white planter and the free coloreds celebrated in the house, the slave festivity took place outside with traditional African drumming, mass characters, and song. Over time, what started to happen is each celebration made a parody of the other by inverting the social order. And so you started to have a conversation between the white planter, the free colored, and the slave. And the carnival was the first major conversation between these three groups in Trinidad and Tobago?
I want to say, so some kind of dialogue was going on there. You know, I want to,
dialogue,
you know what,
a conversating.
A conversation. I want to go back to our synod there, our political synod inside there.
Conversating was happening between the groups, but the medium of that conversating was the carnival.
Yeah.
Because the slave was looking on at the mass ball inside the house, doing what they knew and expressing it how they knew it through their music, the mask that they would wear, and their traditions. And then this thing started now to affect each other. And so the Negro Jardin appears as a character. The Dame Lorraine appears as a character. All of these characters start appearing, but these are conversations between the African slave and the planter, and bringing about now a fusion and a hybridity, because what Carnival became was not an African retention or European retention. It is culture building right here in the Caribbean that was born here out of the crucible of the plantation system and of the creativity of both the African and the European in this dynamic fusion.
Nice conversation. Nice conversation. Evolution or cycle. Let's go.
That's the thing. But what you do know is that over time, each celebration making a parody of each other, mimicking each other, starts inverting the social order. And so the slave becomes a master, the master becomes a slave, the reputable mistress of the or wife of the white planter becomes a Dame Lorraine. And so it went. And each character was depicting something of the horror of plantation life and something of the fascination of one side looking at the other. And that's why I said it was a conversation that started through the medium of Carnival. Because Carnival was always about the collective unconscious of the nation. From its earliest days until now. It's always been about the collective unconscious. And so reading Carnival is like reading a dream for a patient. So somebody comes to you with a dream. You can't read a dream straight off and say, well, I dream straight. And this is what I mean. No. It's about understanding the symbolic language that is speaking through the medium of the dream, and in this case, through the medium of the carnival. And when you understand that language speaking, then you start teasing out what the carnival is actually saying to the citizens of this beautiful and beloved Trinidad and Tobago. And we're both beautiful and beloved.
Yes. So you're taking me to pre-emancipation.
Mm-hmm.
Pre-emancipation, because that's what you're talking about. So, before emancipation.
So before emancipation, what we had was the population was divided into three classes, basically. The white planters and their staff, the white staff, the free coloreds, and the slaves. And what they had in common was two things: the French language and Catholicism. So they were Catholic, they spoke French. And that was what they shared. But their worlds were so different that it was unbelievable. But then Britain captured Trinidad in 1797. But by 1802, it had full control of of Trinidad politically. The island was French by culture, Spanish by law, British by political rule.
Wow.
I wanted to hear the crazy mix-up nature of this beautiful island we have. French by culture, British by political rule, Spanish by law. They had 17 or 18,000 French speakers in Trinidad. The Spanish was only about 2,000, but the whole legal system was Spanish. And they only had a couple hundred British people, but they were the political elites. So you had this tripartite arrangement that was a little bit crazy and a little bit scary. But with that, you had thousands and thousands of African slaves. And so they were the majority of your people. Now, these cultural differences played themselves out beautifully in the carnival. And the British, remember, they were the rulers, huh?
Yeah.
But they were puritanical because by then they were deeply set in the ways of the break with Rome, and they were into this puritanical religion where everything bodily was really suspected of being against God and spirituality and decency and holiness. And so everything of the body was rejected by the British, not by the French. Not by the French. You know, there's a wonderful line by Hilary Belloc: wherever the Catholic sun does shine, there's plenty of good food and fine red wine. At least I've always heard it so. Domine Verbeo. That's a old line that, you know, the French culture brings a love of life, or Catholic culture brings a love of life and a at-homeness in your body.
Yeah.
The British culture, coming out of the Reformation, out of Cromwell, out of Henry VIII, coming out of all of that, had become very much a puritanical culture where the morals and the mores of the elite was very much stiff upper lip and no expression of bodily pleasures and very, very much, you know, we are going to live this very puritanical living. And that was what holiness looked like.
Starch. The clothes were well starched. Yeah.
Well starched. So that's kind of, I wanted to picture the African slave with that culture, the French planter and free colored with that culture, and then the puritanical British overseeing and ruling these two cultures and a small group of Spanish speakers and the British overseeing and ruling that. That is, if you want to understand a picture of Trinidad, early 1800s, that's a picture.
You reminded me of something, you know, it's like when we first went to the United with England to play Test cricket, and you went to play at Lord's. You understand?
Yes.
You had on your shirt and tie. And
yes. The whole thing. Now, if you understand the nature of the puritanical religion and the shock that the British rulers received when their moral sensitivities were sent flying in a million directions when they witnessed the African parts of the carnival, you have to understand that shock and awe caused trauma to the British rulers.
Yeah.
So they're not the majority and they're not holding the culture, but they're the political elite.
Yeah.
And it's creating real havoc for the political elite. But these different perspectives, the African perspective, the French perspective, the British perspective, have been working themselves through Carnival for the last 200 years. For the last 200 years, that's what we've been seeing. And that's what we want to start uncovering. How did this thing work its way through? Well, that's what we'll be looking at. So during slavery, the plurality of culture in Trinidad was really not only there, but it was enforced stratification. The French planter or the free-colored planter would never come outside to the African celebration, and the African would never dare into the house of the planter during the carnival time. Both had their carnival separated by distance, inside the house, outside of the house. Two very different things happening, different energies, different mores, different morals, different everything. But we have to see that that's how the first phase up to emancipation. In emancipation, and I'm talking now in a broad brushstroke, 1834 right up to about 1890, we saw the rise of the Jamet Carnival.
Jamet Carnival, all right.
Well, you had to go there? You really had to go there? Really?
You're talking to Deacon.
We saw the rise of the Jamet Carnival.
Yeah.
From 1890 to 1950, we saw the reintegration of the social classes in Carnival.
Okay.
And 1950 to the 1980s, that was the epic mass. And 1990s to the present.
Bikini and beads.
Made in China. Made in China. And I want you to hear that progression. Huh?
Yeah.
Because it starts from social segregation that is highly enforced by not only culture but law. And then it moves to the Jamet Carnival when the African takes over the street and starts shaping the street festival of Carnival. And then the reintegration of the social classes in the Carnival up to the 1980s, and then now to the present, bikini and beads and the social disintegration of the festival and all the challenges that we now see. So this is my kind of broad brush of time span, and saying let's delve in and see how in each epoch the carnival was seen differently, but how in each epoch that different view of the carnival actually became a way of understanding the soul of the nation, or way of reading the soul of the nation. Because remember, that's my thesis, huh?
Yeah.
Carnival is a way of reading the soul of the nation. So the festival has moved from this displaying an enforced social stratification to social integration, and then to enforce stratification one more time. That's the cycle.
That's the cycle. So
that's the cycle.
Enforce social stratification to social integration. So we go from enforce social stratification, all your can't mix, right?
No mixing.
To social integration. But what you're saying now is to enforce stratification one more time. I want to know where you're going with this.
We will get there. How is there enforced stratification in the carnival right now?
I can tell you. I mean, I see, guys with ropes all around, making sure that people don't mix the prices of some of the bands. You can't afford that. You know what I mean? All inclusive.
So let's walk through the history, and you'll see how that re-emergence says something about the soul of our nation and something about us. That's for me, what is the most frightening part with this whole reading of the carnival from these perspectives, that it really says something about us and our time. That we really have to look at it and really challenge ourselves that we will do something a lot better than what we're doing right now. So once emancipation came and the slave was freed, Carnival evolved significantly in the next phase. The French planters continued their masked balls in their homes. The free slaves took to the streets, and a whole new phase in the carnival began. In the early time, there was a strict stratification. The white planters and the colored planters and the professionals, all in their houses, the free slaves separate on the street. And each developed the carnival in their own space. And this was important. You had this wonderful experiment happening with the mass balls going one direction, with the African slave going another direction, and with this checking in on each other to ensure or that, you know, the thing was happening, but totally separated. Never the twain shall meet. Totally separated. And that I think was quite amazing in its own time. But then we had Camberley emerge. And Camberley is really part of this early period. And it was a street event or street festival that was depicting the harvesting of cane and the harvesting of the cane and all that went into it. Now, this is the forerunner of Juve, because the Camberley never started till after midnight on the Sunday. So early Monday morning, in other words, 4-day morning. But the Camberley really starts with masked characters who had lighted torches, dancing in the street. Camberley represents the defiance of the former slaves. And well, you know, it was meant to terrorize the white planter in a very hostile post-emancipation Trinidad. And so the fire itself, because you would light the canes of fire to be able to harvest, so it burns out all of the little rubble in between, all the stubble in between, and all the animals, and then you could go and harvest easily.
Yeah.
But that fire, if it turned to the planter house, if it turned to this or that or the other, that's drama. And so it was a little bit of apprehension in terms of the drama. But what happens with the Camberley is that the Camberley takes a whole energy of a people who have been enslaved for 200 years at this stage, and now free to be on the street and express themselves. It was daring, it was defiant, it was terrorizing, it was living out the unlived life of the slave who had been captured and who had to be docile while in the plantation. And now on the streets of Carnival, what you have is no longer docility. What you have is raw power and energy.
Yeah.
And that was something to behold.
Yeah, and then you had also the majority who were the African slaves. So of course, yes, that was really a frightening thing for the plantation owner. What will you do next? And you have your torches and your and so on, and you're enacting that, and of course they were always afraid of the drum, you know, the drum, because it carried messages.
Yes, and you have to remember that the only way that a minority population could enslave a majority population is by demonizing.
Yeah.
And so the drum was seen as demonic. The African religion was seen as demonic. And this was spread up until our day, where it's seen as demonic, as worshiping devil, as opposed to seen as just a traditional way of prayer and expressing the creativity and the union with the divine.
Yeah.
And so once we understand how the African is seen in its demonic lens, you have to understand they're playing with fire early in the night.
Yeah.
And they have energy in what they're doing on the street. You have to feel the sheer terror of the planter. You have to feel it. You just have to feel it. And that's kind of what was happening. But during this first 100-year cycle, many characters emerged. The Bookman, the Dame Lorraine, the Baby Doll, the Devil Mask, Jab Jambolase, the Midnight Robber, the Moko Jambi, Negro Jardin, Peregrinade, Bats, Wild Indians, and Sailors. You hear that list?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a list of who is who in Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago. Those were the figures that emerged, like the Baby Doll. The Baby Doll was a character of a woman who was dressed up very kind of sheepily and very coy, holding a baby. And any man who dared to pass was accused of being the father of that baby. That was sheer horror.
Yeah.
For the man, because you were not let off the hook until you paid, and you had to pay. Otherwise, she was following you wherever you went and creating more and more of a scene wherever you were. So you had to pay a lot of money to get her off your case. You know, each of these, the Midnight Robber, with all of the lyrics of you know, that's a whole other, the Sailor, the Wild Indian, all of these were part of the Jamet Carnival. But, you know, the Jamet Carnival really rocked the British political elite, something deep and something terrifying. They had a very different look about the carnival than the slaves would have had, than the French would have had. And that different look is what I want us to immerse into at this moment. I want you to hear this text. Listen carefully. We will not dwell on the disgusting and indecent scenes that were enacted in our streets. We will not say how many we saw in a state of nearly approaching nudity as to outrage decency and shock modesty. We will not particularly describe the woman on a pole, which was followed by hundreds of Negroes yelling out a savage Ghanaian song. We will not describe the ferocious fight, but we will say at once that the custom of keeping carnival by allowing the lower order of society to run about the street in wretched masquerades belongs to other days and ought to be abolished in our own.
Wait.
Now, that was 2018, huh?
Huh? 2018?
Yeah, 2018. Yeah, that was 20. That is an apt description of 2018. The only problem with this description is this was 1838. That's the only problem with the description. So I wanted to hear that description of Carnival in 1838. It could be 2018 before COVID hit us. Easily. It could describe all the fetes with jam naked and
Tinkadati.
It could describe all of that. It could describe the out-of-hand lewdness that has crept into our carnival. But I want you to hear, though, that this quotation was 1838. It was in the Port of Spain Gazette, 1838. When you get that through your head, you understand what I mean about the cycle now.
Yeah.
You understand that in 1838, just after emancipation, there was this big pent-up energy that came bundling out onto the stage. And the British commenter commenting on this saw it as lewd, as crude, as nudity, as fighting, and ends up by saying, but we will say at once that the custom of keeping carnival by allowing the lower order of society to run about the streets in wretched masquerades and nakedness belongs to other days and ought to be abolished in our own. 1838, okay? Get that date clearly etched in your head, because what was described could be 2018 easily.
Yeah.
Easy, and I dare say 2023. We could just take this, change the date, and put it out onto the newspapers, and nobody will see it as an odd commentary on what they experience on this carnival. They will never see it as odd.
The mother of all carnivals.
Boy, it ain't easy. So now we come to Jamet Carnival, which is really this phase from after emancipation right up till the 1890s. And this is the phase when all of these bands come out. You know, David Rudder has this wonderful song, Little Man. Enough is enough, say little man. I'm going to bring out my ancient tenor pan. The carnival soft, that is a fact. But I'm going down in tongue to bring it back. Leroy, bring your saxophone. Call the man with the trombone. and the whole musical composition starts in that song. And the whole song is little man recognizing that the carnival got soft. Mm-hmm. And that song was from the 90s, huh?
Yeah.
Okay? That song was from the 90s. The carnival got soft, and only little man, you hear the name of the person?
Yeah.
Could bring back and restore the carnival to its true dignity and glory. Only little man. But anyhow, Jamet Carnival. By 1846, the British government had outlawed masking on the streets. By 1849, restrictions were placed on music and dance of the free slaves. And by 1880, African percussion instruments were outlawed.
What?
So you have to hear so you have to think from the British perspective as a puritanical, this wild stuff happening on the streets of the city has to be controlled. And how else do we control it? They don't have the manpower to control it. They're the minority. What they have is the law and the legislation, and they use the law to outlaw these things. 1846, masking was outlawed. 49, restrictions were placed on music and dancing of the free slaves, and 1880, percussion instruments, African percussion instruments, completely outlawed. That's the elements of the culture, okay?
Yeah.
So one group, the British, looking at another group, the African, uses the political power to outlaw the elements of carnival.
That's cause for war, you know. That's cause for war, you know.
Well, boah. By 1881, the antagonism between the British political elite and the French planter and the freed African slave led to what we now call the Camberley riots. And there was a huge explosion. And that's how, again, the carnival, remember my thing, the carnival is a reed the state of the soul of the nation.
Yeah.
And what you had was a divided self in terms of nationhood. The political elite, the French planter, and the slave, or the ex-slave now, running in three totally different directions. And the power of the political elite to stop all of the things associated with the African culture. That was the percussion instruments, the dancing, the mask itself, and in doing that outlawing, collision on the streets. Camberley riots, but you know what? Nothing stopped the carnival. Nothing stopped the carnival. After 1881, it really looked, Captain Baker, who was a British man, took particular umbrage to the carnival and decided that hell or high water, he was going to stop the carnival. When an unstoppable object reaches an immovable wall, you know what happens. Something have to give. And what gave in 1882, the leaders of the Camberley worked out with the media to publish rules for the next carnival. So rather than going into retreat, it forced an evolution of the carnival. And the carnival now goes to a new place where it now has rules for engagement. We might have to do that, you know.
Hey, we think
force the rules. I must go and find them rules and see if we can just put it in the newspaper today. And because it forces the rules, it causes an evolution. Also, the business class began to sponsor elements of the carnival, including prizes, the king and queen, and all kinds of things. And all that impacted the festival and the society. The middle class entered the street festival over the next decades. But I want you to see the parallel here with the steel pan. Once the big business chose to sponsor a band, and what I see that I love is that sponsorship is not just money being thrown at a band, but there's a lot of mentorship happening with the band.
Yeah.
And many times the executive and the panman and the leader and the arranger work really, really closely together to make sure the development of that space of the band, its people, is happening in the best possible way. And that I think is a parallel, that time and our time, now that there's a new level of sponsorship. Before, the sponsorship was more just kind of, we'll get the money, but don't harass us. Now the sponsorship is far more, we giving you the money, yeah? But we come in and we journeying with you. Mm-hmm. And we want to be part of you, and you have to become us as we become you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so there's a more dynamic model, which is what we see happening here after that collision of 1881. So with the ban on the African drum, the tamboo bamboo emerged, and which evolved eventually into the iron bands, and using discarded brake drums from trucks and cars, and then dustbins and biscuit tins, all of that evolved into the pan. I want you to see this, you know. You know, we have this Holy Saturday thing, oh, happy fault, except for you, a Savior Christ our Lord would never be born. If not for the banning of the musical instruments of the African, the tamboo bamboo would never be born. And if not for the tamboo bamboo, they would have never gone to steel. And if they didn't go to steel, they would have never picked up a biscuit tin, and they would have never picked up a 55-gallon
steel drum,
oil drum. And we would not have had the steel pan. So I want you to see how the force on the culture creates its evolution. Twice I'm showing you this. It's the constriction and the force on the culture creates its evolution. First, with the pushback, new rules emerge. Second, another pushback on instruments, and new instrument emerge, and ultimately the pan emerges out of this constriction. Now, I find that, I don't know about you, but I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
So sometimes, if the culture does not have boundaries that have been set and that are being enforced, it does not evolve.
Yeah, yeah.
It actually might be devolving,
yeah,
rather than evolving. But that's a thought to hold for now. By 1930, the street festival involved all social classes in society. People were jumping with these bands, mixing in every way possible. And yes, there was segregation in the rest of the year, but in Carnival, there was a lot of intermixing of people. And with the elites up on the lorries, so there was a separation, but there was a vertical separation. Mm-hmm. Remember, the separation before was outside the house, inside the house.
Right.
Then inside the house, onto the streets. Now everybody on the streets, but we up on lorries. You with me?
Yeah, I hear you.
But you see, we getting closer together.
Right, right.
We all getting closer. So when that started, the elites up on the lorries, the lower caste dancing up and down on the street, the vertical separation melted with time as the carnival entered its next phase. With the rise of the pan and a new phase in the mass, we have another evolution again in the mass. And for me, that was each evolution I find breathtaking, that it could have happened, that it actually did happen. And we have to see what that means. So by the 1950s, the festival incorporated steel pans into it. You know, in 1951, we sent a steel band to London. Huh?
Yes.
To a music festival in London. We sent a whole band. So we're going to go and play. And the traditional carnival characters now organized into bands. And they gave Carnival a much more mythic character than it would have had before. Because before it would be just whatever random things are happening. But now it's emerging into the band, is emerging into the mythic themes. And what we start now is what I would consider the golden age of Carnival. You know, what emerged is the epic mass. The history depictions of George Bailey, Harold Sildina, Bobby Ammon, the fantasy portrayals of Wayne Barkley, Erwin McWilliams, and Edmund and Lil Hart, and the theatrical masterpiece of Peter Minshall.
Yeah, the golden era, boy, the golden era.
And what is beautiful and brilliant is that in that golden era, we came off of lorries, we came onto the street, black, white, rich, poor, Chinese, Indian, everybody started to move into the carnival. And for those 2 days, there was integration in society that you did not see as easily on the other days. Now, I know certainly by the 60s and 70s, you gone to school and you sitting down in class next to people from all walks, ethnicities, and backgrounds in Trinidad and Tobago. That's what makes us beautiful. But that was happening in the carnival. And now look at the soul of the nation. I want you to see now the state of the soul of the nation. When the social integration actually starts happening much more than it had ever happened. Remember, this is now 100 and something years after emancipation.
Right.
1838, So this is 112 years after emancipation. Now social integration is starting to happen on the streets of Carnival. And what explodes is epic mass.
Yes.
What explodes is beauty and festivity and the carnival at its absolute best, with characters that were portraying themes and histories and fantasies and mythologies that were an explosion of beauty on the streets of Trinidad. And when they talk about Trinidad Carnival, most times our reference is to that golden era of Carnival, where you have the Bad John become a musician. Mm-hmm. You had the ex-slave as a musician, but also as a wire bender, as a seamstress, as a creator, as an innovator, as the person running the mass camp, where all the mass is being created and everybody's coming together. And the mass camp, like what the steel band yard is now, the mass camp was exactly that, and the forerunner to what the steel band yard is right now. I hope you see how in this golden era, where all these forces come together, you start to have now a movement. Was it perfect? It was not perfect. What was it complete? It was not complete. But you start to have this movement that sends the mass into its most beautiful portrayals. And when Peter Minshall talks about the mass, he's talking about not just the epic mass of these great designers. He's talking about the sailor mask, the baby doll mask, the bookman mask. He's talking about all these characters that came up through the Jamet Carnival that are still on the streets of Port of Spain, while the epic mass is also happening. And these are fusing because now sailor band become pretty sailor bands.
Yes.
And these are the epic characters that are being incorporated in. And now the fusion of the two cultures into one culture. And we could say 1950s was that moment where the carnival showed forth something of this, the health of the state, of the soul of the nation. And all was starting to get right with my soul.
All was getting well with your soul, but even the soul of the nation was healthier.
Well, is the nation I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All was getting well with the soul of the nation. There was still great segregation. That doesn't come to an end until 1970, 1980. But there was a move in the carnival before there was a move in the business society.
Nice.
The carnival was what was happening in the carnival hadn't yet happened in the rest of society. That's why I'm saying it was the forerunner of what will happen after 1970 revolution and in the whole 70s and 80s as the social integration starts to happen. It had already started in the carnival, which brought this flurry of explosion, which brought these big epic bands, but which also brought the African characters and the Jamet characters to the fore of the nation to be celebrated and not feared.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up. The golden era. Thumbs up.
Now, what happens after that is a mystery. It's not so mysterious, you know. Because what I want to see is the next era, from the 80s on, bikini and beads. You know, the joke is now, long time you saw a costume, you ask, where the band? Mm-hmm. Now you see a costume, you have to ask, well, wait, which band you in? Because long time when you see a costume, you knew which band they were in because you knew what their band was portraying and you could see clearly which band they were from. Now you could take a whole section in this band and move them into a section in that band and nobody will know there was a design flaw in the band.
You could join it.
No. There are a few bands that still keep to design. You have a few bands. So I'm not brushing everybody with the same tar brush. But in the 1980s, Peter Minshall tried, through his many portrayals, to comment on the deterioration of the mass and ultimately on the society. And here we have a prophetic element to the carnival again, which I have demonstrated in the music. Right. But I'm showing now how the mass itself was calling forth a grieving of the direction and a challenge to the direction that the mass and the whole society was going on. And I would say that's worth its own reflection. That trilogy of Peter Minshall. The artist and the massman saw a moral degradation of both Carnival and Trinidad and Tobago. And they tried to speak to this through the mass. And that was Peter Minshall. And Rudder mentions that in the Long Time Band. He says, a man trying, I think Peter Minshall is his name. that's a line in the Long Time Band. And what Minshall does in the 80s, I remember, he starts off with the portrayal of River, and it begins this trilogy of these three great bands that came. The queen of the band was Washerwoman, represented life and purity. The king was Man Crab, and was the symbol of greed and technological madness, and killing the atmosphere, killing the creation, etc., etc. And the lifeless body was carried. So in a fierce battle between these two, Washerwoman was killed. Washerwoman was killed by Man Crab.
Right.
And the lifeless body of Washerwoman was now carried away. And what happened? The whole mass was in white, was pure white, representing the purity of the soul of the nation up until this fierce battle took place. And then when the fierce battle took place, the second thing that happened now is the river people started to douse each other with paint of many colors. And the ritual pollution that came across the whole stage, the once pristine masquerader becomes a muddy purple masquerader. And what that portrays is the corruption of the soul, of the nation. Yeah. And his commentary was on money. His commentary was on the technology, on the killing of the creation. It was on all of these things that we are now lamenting. Brian McFarlane, Peter Samuel, Rosalind Gabriel for the youth, the Catholic band with Deacon Derek, all try to keep the integrative and creative spirit of Carnival alive. They all did. I remember when the Catholic band came out, that was a big thing. We had to go back to that golden time. I remember people doing Genesis and Exodus and great grand portrayals. And that was big. But in the 1980s, Minshall drew attention to a drift in the carnival from art to business and greed. And what he was saying basically is we've lost our way. Now we're imitating Brazil. Just now, they could be trying to imitate us because we're getting better than them at their own game. No art or imagination is necessary anymore. Nudity is what is being sold. And the importation of costumes from China means that many bands look alike, but also the artistry that we had, the community that the band house was, and the sense of connection that the band was, are things that are being lost in the prevailing culture. There's one person who has 5 bands, and these are your biggest bands, and they are making big money. And that is no longer about art. That is now all about money.
The dollar.
I had a conversation right here back in 2008 or 9 with 3 of the top mass producers of the time. And I asked, what is the role of the artist? And basically 2 of them said, my role is to satisfy the desires of my clients. And this is what my clients want. I said, so you are not an artist. You are just a straight business. He said, this is what my clients want. One of them, Brian McFarlane, said, no. The mass can't just mirror society. The mass has to hold a way for society to evolve and become better than itself. And here's the split. When the mass is only mirroring what the desire of people is, it's amplifying that desire and sending us down to the LCM. And it's sending us backwards to that former time where we had this great, great challenge with the nudity and the licentiousness of the masquerade. But when the mass actually opens up to the future and opens up to the portrayals and to the epic and to all of that, it's because the soul of the nation is healthy. The problem is not what we see on the streets of Carnival Monday and Tuesday. The problem is the soul of the nation is ill. And we have to find a way to bring healing to the soul of the nation if we're going to find a way to move the carnival to what it can be, what we have seen before, and the epic glory that we have all experienced before. Now, what we have is the all-inclusive bands. So we're back to forced segregation again.
Mm-hmm.
The rope that's roping off is no longer vertical, is now a rope, and is forcing the segregation one more time. The price of the bands is forcing the segregation one more time. And what's happening in Carnival is a reflection of the gated communities and the segregation of the middle, upper middle, and lower classes, so that this segregation that we have now gone into in our mentality is now being portrayed in the carnival. And that's not producing a better mass. It's producing back to the nakedness, back to the licentious, and back to a mass that is not about beauty and artistry or poetry. And Peter Minshall named this when he did River in the 1980s. And his trilogy in the 1980s speaks exactly to this. The mass bands, for the most part, have moved in the opposite direction of the steel band. The steel band has moved to social integration.
Right.
The mass band has been moving to social stratification. And it was not so before. It was not so. Man Crab has won this rounds. Man Crab has won this rounds. But brother, this ain't the warrior. This is just a battle.
It's just a battle.
The war for the soul of Trinidad and Tobago is still to be fought and still to be won.
You remind
me. Ain't finished yet. The journey now starts.
You know, this reminds me when you spoke about the revolution of the 1970s. It ain't finished yet.
No. This one, we ain't done with this one yet.
Yeah.
Because we're better than this.
Yeah.
We are better than this. And we have more resilience than this. But it's going to force some containment that would allow another evolution. And that's really where we're going. But what's the key message? Carnival is a lens into the soul of Trinidad and Tobago. And right now, I will tell you, our soul ain't doing so good at all. The state of the soul is a little bit anemic. Lust, social stratification, greed is consuming us and is being seen on the stage of Carnival on a regular basis. I want you to contemplate, and this is your action step, the movement of the 200-year history that I have narrated here today. And are we heading in the right direction? If you believe we're heading in the right direction, well, check yourself. And if you realize we are not heading in the right direction, then what must we do? What must we do for the soul of the nation to come to healing? Am I reading?
Yeah.
1 Timothy 9:6-9-11. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs.
Woo. That is taken from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 9 to 11. Pick up all your Catholic news. Just remember that. Archbishop G, thank you so much for this conversation. It was deep. It was reflective in terms of, mirroring society, carnival, evolution or cycle. Say a little prayer with us. Please, we need the prayer.
Father, we pray that you will give us wisdom from on high that will help us to speak to the soul of this nation. And give us the way forward, Lord, that we can help with the healing of the soul of this nation. That we can find the way, Lord, together to flourish again, to thrive again, so that every creed and race will find an equal place. And together, oh God, we will stand and say, and may God bless our nation.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Archbishop J. Pick up your Catholic news. Don't forget, the 11th of February, in all our parishes, we are having this healing mass. Archbishop J is going to be up at Our Lady of Lourdes from 5:30, right? So God bless you. Our nation needs to be healed. God bless Archbishop J.
Amen. God bless.